I think if you try to apply a one-size-fits-all strategy to all of Asia Pacific, you just end up wasting your money. And I'm of the true belief that if you want to play in the APAC market, it's a constantly shifting region, very diverse. If you want to play in it, you have to go all in. You can't do it halfway and hope that your US-based marketing messages or strategy are going to just magically resonate. You'll just end up wasting your money.
Hello and welcome back to Asia AIM, the show where we decode marketing across Japan and the Asia Pacific and shine a light on the people sharing business, ideas and innovation in this incredibly diverse region. I'm your host, Robert Heldt, and today we're diving into one of the biggest misconceptions in APAC marketing, the idea that one strategy can fit every country. Anyone who's worked in markets like Australia, Japan, Korea, Singapore, or India knows that couldn't be further from the truth. To help us unpack this, I'm joined by Vivien Dao, Growth Marketing Manager for Asia Pacific and Japan at a leading US-based tech company. Vivien sits right at the intersection of marketing strategy and go-to-market execution. She has hands-on experience rolling out global campaigns while tailoring them for local audiences, truly bridging the gap between global vision and regional realities. In our conversation, we'll talk about why a blanket approach rarely works, how to strike a balance between consistency and local nuance, and practical ways to adapt strategies so they truly resonate from country to country. Vivien, it's such a pleasure to have you here. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Robert. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. So you've been leading growth marketing across such different markets. From your perspective, what makes APAC such a unique and sometimes challenging region compared to places like Europe or North America?
Yeah, for sure. Look, I don't have a benchmark for Europe, but I think in many ways it could actually be quite similar to the Asia Pacific and Japan region in terms of the multi-language and multicultural approach. But I think, that's what makes the APAC region unique, exciting and challenging all at the same time. It's a rapidly growing region with different levels of maturity with regards to the industry I work in. That's cybersecurity maturity from a B2B space. And so, it's really interesting to see that level of maturity vary across the whole region, across different countries. And it's always exciting, I guess, from an economic point of view as well, right? Like I feel a personal affinity and connection to the region being an Australian-born Vietnamese person. So it's really nice to see the economy grow in this region, the rapid growth, the investments that, foreign companies are making in this region. And I just really want to see it thrive. I also think the intersection of cybersecurity and geopolitics has been a really interesting point for me. It makes it very interesting to navigate and impacts everything from, the type of content that we put out through to the way I have to manage my budgets, which is all in USD, right? So the fluctuations that come with that. Everything happening here and a very, very exciting region.
Indeed, right. It's such a exciting region from many perspectives. And I think this whole globalization as well as, the digital transformation shift in countries like Japan and, that have been very analog is definitely kind of pushing this growth as well. So exciting time to be in the market for sure.
Definitely.
And what are some of the common pitfalls you've seen when companies try to roll out one single strategy across this APAC region?
It's really funny. There's something that one of my colleagues says. It's kind of like an uphill battle to show headquarters sometimes that it's not a singular country. APAC is a very diverse region. There's lots of countries in it. And so for all the reasons that I mentioned prior with regards to the diversity, the language, the multiculturalism, a singular approach just won't work. I think at a high level for global campaigns, sure, but then you also need to factor where do the campaigns meet the audience? Does the market maturity exist there? Are people aware of like the concept that you're trying to sell or the solution? Do they know of their own pain points even? And like the persona that you're selling to, the messages you put out to appeal to that persona, does it even exist in that particular country, right? So again, for my space, which is cybersecurity, in some countries, in some sectors within those countries as well, have different varying levels of maturity. But, for some companies, the CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, doesn't even know or, need to have oversight over the tools that their team are using every single day. Whereas in other companies, in other countries, you have CISOs who are on the tools every single day. So it's just like that varying level of maturity or just differences across all the different countries. And I think if you try to apply a one-size-fits-all strategy to all of Asia Pacific, you just end up wasting your money. And, I'm of the true belief that if you want to play in the APAC market, it's a constantly shifting region, very diverse. If you want to play in it, you have to go all in. You can't do it halfway and hope that, your US-based marketing messages or strategy are going to just magically resonate. You'll just end up wasting your money.
Yeah, it's really wise words. And it sounds like there's a lot of education you need to do based on the country, based on the, a maturity level, right? Because, it's difficult for, some markets that are really playing catch up while some markets are advanced and, have, already global, leading, businesses in the market. So the maturity levels are kind of rising with that. But if it's not there, then you're really definitely trying to educate from the ground up. So when you take global initiatives and try to bring it to life into APAC, what are the big differences you notice on a regional level and then again on a country level? So,
yeah, I mean, pretty much exactly what you said before, right? Sometimes when you're entering the Asia Pacific region, you are entering a new market. It's a complete new space. So there is still a lot of brand awareness in some countries and market education. I think sometimes at global, in this case, like the United States, a lot of the time for companies I've worked for, they've been operating in that region for double, triple, quadruple the amount of time. So a lot of the campaigns that come out from a global perspective are beyond that market education and brand awareness. And at this point, it's more about kind of, value add use cases or just trying to compete with a lot of different competitors. In a lot of ways here in APAC, it's still green space, and it's awesome because you have that blank space to really step up and drive something new. But it also means you often have to look at the assets your team are pushing out globally and take a step back and think, is this going to resonate with the market here? Not only from, obviously like a language perspective, right, but also the context. And so, one of the things that we have done successfully here is working with, AIM B2B or custom media over the last year to enter Japan from a digital space. Some of the key differences have been at the global level and, in a lot of, I guess, like countries like Singapore or Australia here, we rely quite heavily on LinkedIn from a B2B perspective. It's great, obviously, highly targeted accounts, a highly targeted platform for, a targeted number of accounts and right down to that persona level as well. But in Japan, it's nearly entirely not used for our industry. And in a lot of ways, it's kind of like the inverse, right? We don't really use Facebook from a B2B setting in other countries, but that's kind of where it shines in Japan. And then on top of that, it's the English professional proficiency as well. And that's impacted a lot of things that I didn't even consider to begin with. For example, our website is natively in English and the way that the UX is designed is for English text. So when you try to translate the whole page for a Japanese market, you have issues with not enough text to give the context. The text kind of cuts off at the wrong place. So the sentence doesn't make sense because the phrase doesn't match. And so that's something I definitely didn't factor into my plans or my budgets originally. And it was definitely a big learning curve for me. So marketers beware. If you're entering the Japan market, it is really awesome, really dynamic. And from, for our industry in cybersecurity, it is very mature as well. But be prepared for the costs. There's just like all these things you kind of have to consider, when you're starting in a new market. Do you kind of have the infrastructure to support all of that localization and that content.
Yeah, that's really true. And I think, in a market like Japan, right, the veracity of content you need to share with your target audience is pretty high. They want to get a lot of information, and they demand a lot of education as well. So it's up to, the company, to provide that for you to create all this content and, provide that to your target audience, whether they're existing customers or potential customers. So that's definitely a lot of content creation needs, and in the local language, right? English doesn't really cut it. Although it's, one of the top, countries globally, right? Even with all those differences, are there certain playbooks or guiding principles that you found actually work across multiple, APAC markets?
Yeah, for sure. When I started in this new market, and I'm entering a lot of new markets from a digital space in this region, I kind of came to figure out there are kind of 3 core things that you can kind of latch onto, and just to kick off the whole process, right? So the first thing is identifying maturity for each of the countries. You can't go and run, 100 different campaigns. I think, you probably could if you had a lot of resources, but in my case, definitely not, right? So I had to kind of find those common threads. For me, one of the common threads was that market maturity with regards to where a lot of countries and the sectors and the different types of companies within those countries are from a cybersecurity perspective, or particularly threat intelligence. And so, figuring out, some countries are a lot more mature in their approach and they're ready to have those more robust threat intelligence conversations, value-added use case conversations. And so we can run a lot of the existing, global level campaign messages in those countries, of course, like localizing it to meet the language requirements if needed. For example, in Japan, Singapore and Australia is also an example of 2 other countries with high cybersecurity maturity. So that one's pretty straightforward because it's all English there. But, other countries are still kind of starting out that threat intelligence journey. There's still a lot of market education and awareness. And so it's thinking about, some of the previous campaigns that we run at a global level, maybe 2 to 3 years ago, and adapting it to this region. Not saying that, it's a laggard thing, but it is certainly still at market awareness and brand awareness for a lot of those countries. So just having different streams that you can lean on with regards to the campaigns that you run at the APAC level. The second thing is also just determining where the business priorities are, right? So that's an easy way to kind of figure out what some of the where some of the priorities need to be. So an easy thing is like revenue split or target revenue split. So where are your big bets? Where do you have the most existing customers? And then where do you want to see the shift for growth towards in 1 to 2 years? That's kind of where then you need to start to really ramp up on that brand awareness in those countries, but then also ensuring that you have the right conversion points for countries where you're already seeing a lot of traction. There's already a lot of movement. And the last thing is really ensuring that whatever you do, you have those local customer case studies, right? So those are the things that need to be quite like highly localized. I think, some of the big US and European brand names are helpful, but nothing beats a local case study from a customer. And those are the things that really bolster your credibility in the region. So that's something that I definitely seek to prioritize in this region, particularly as we're starting out from a digital perspective here. These are the things that need to be highly localized, and you can take the US case studies, but I don't think anything beats a local case study here.
Yeah, that's always a tricky and challenging one we find, working with our clients as well. So when you're starting out, because you don't have a local case study, right, then you need to really cherry pick the one that's going to resonate with the market, really understand your target audience, and then find out what's the use case that's going to be relevant to, the target you're trying to reach here in Japan or in Korea for that matter. And actually, you mentioned, Singapore and Australia being fairly mature. Japan and Korea, they are at really different maturity level, I would imagine, in your industry. Have you found, anything that you can talk about in these 2 countries? What's your approaches for these 2 countries specifically?
Yeah, for sure. So, yes, with regards to cybersecurity maturity, it is pretty much on par with Singapore and Australia. In some ways, I would probably say slightly more mature, just with the way that the market responds to the messages and how much they resonate with them. But yeah, then the tricky thing becomes, how do you adapt that the brand voice, the brand consistency for those regions, right? Because it's not necessarily a one-for-one translation. Trust me, I know, I learnt the hard way. And so, it's really interesting because at the beginning of us starting out this whole process, the one thing I wanted to make sure was we had that brand consistency as well, right? Because the maturity was already there, but perhaps the application wasn't. And so we had to kind of sit down with our customers, our internal team, our external partners, and just think, okay, what are we going to say in this region? We know what we want to say and we know what pain points we solve for, but how do we actually say it? Because I think sometimes the company tagline doesn't translate directly, or even anything down to kind of like the way we describe ourselves and our about us, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good what you explained there in terms of, how you try to maintain brand voice in a consistent level, globally as well as regionally, and, adapting the key messages, to the local audience is so critical. And you touched upon teams, right? So what's your approach to kind of empowering teams, working with teams, understanding their markets? You're doing a fantastic job of that. But how do you, empower them to, execute locally while, keeping the overall brand messaging aligned, as well as the global strategy, because you're responsible for growth and delivering results in these very important markets?
So I think one way to empower, local teams and agencies to execute effectively is, one, choose good agencies. And, we got really lucky, I think, with our journey with AIM B2B or custom media. But, for some other regions, it is a bit of trial and error to start, right? And I won't lie, the early days are hard. They're very hands-on as well, particularly because at the time when we were kickstarting these processes in this region, we were also relaunching our global brand. And so there was a lot of, there was still a lot of gaps. The team was still building it out, and we were all learning about how we convey our messages and convey what we do in a new way, and simultaneously trying to teach our agencies to march to the same beat of the drum, right? So I think, being prepared to do a lot of the brunt work and sitting with your agency and, filling out all the spreadsheets and answering all the questions and, getting on the tools yourself in the early days is a really great way to not only kind of like kickstart the whole process, but build that trust and relationship with the agency. And I think also being able to, empower your local teams. I mean, I sat down with our customers in Japan and our internal team, and I basically kind of showed them our new brand and all the new taglines and the new messages. And I asked them, I'm like, what do they think of the brand? What do they think of, this tagline? And when they think of our business, what do they want to see, right? What are their expectations? And so, we ask them, what are some of the key things that we need to have stick out in the taglines? What are the key messages we need to convey? Is it, how do we talk about proactivity, for example, in a Japanese context? And then what do our partners also aspire for us to appear as in the market to help them grow as well? So by kind of connecting with the local teams and understanding what are the key pain points we solve for in that region, what are some of the key customer concerns, and continuing to test over and over again, putting those new messages in front of the team or new processes or concepts in front of them. I think that's a really great way to empower them to, maintain that alignment with the global strategy, but with the localized flair.
Thank you for those kind words. I know, in the early days, it's definitely a steep learning curve and the onboarding process. And you did put in a lot of time and effort to help us get up to speed with your industry, because we are not specialists in your industry and specialists in B2B marketing, period, right? So that it's a partnership, right? And that's something we really value working with you, and thank you for that. Resource allocation must be tough as well, right? How do you prioritize and divide your resources across so many markets?
Yeah. So I guess going back to the conversation about, using good agencies, I think a relationship with a good agency is two ways. you can learn a lot from the local agencies that you use from a data perspective and just understanding the cultural nuances of that market. And so, maintaining that relationship and being open to feedback and internal review processes is going to kind of set you up for success with regards to understanding, okay, like where do my resources actually need to go to? Local agencies have that data and that knowledge around what assets and what channels are going to be most effective in that region. LinkedIn is very expensive, and luckily we haven't really tapped into it in Japan yet. But then, other channels is probably where the money is better spent, but can be more expensive. In the ASEAN region, for example, cost per click is generally a lot lower, but, we need more volume. And so it's just kind of like trying to balance all of that out as well. But I think, it's to kind of figure out how to allocate the resources across different country markets. Again, starting just with the revenue goal split is the easiest way to figure out, okay, where do we need to kind of focus and put our money there? But then also being prepared to make some pretty hefty adjustments along the way, continuing to test, look at the data, understand if the messages are resonating here or if the channel is resonating for that particular market. And, be prepared to see that, split really change along the way because, again, different markets have different maturity, different costs per click. And I think also be prepared to spend a little bit more than you originally anticipated. But yeah, I think net, resource allocation is something that is continuously changing. And, as you go along, you can see, as you go along and you test different campaigns in markets, you can kind of start to get a better understanding of where that money is best placed. And it's not always a one-for-one correlation for the cost of a lead and how much that might cost to convert. It's often some of the smaller, more nuanced things like that you don't originally factor into ad spend. So, the cost of, having 100 pages be localized, for example, because the ads are redundant otherwise if they don't have, a destination to go to, or, making sure that, all of these assets are localized fully because, again, you can't go to market, in a low English professional proficiency country with an English asset. So those are the things that you kind of also have to take into account. Yeah.
That's true. You mentioned earlier, you visited Japan and, did workshops with your team and your clients. That is also a lot of time and resource heavy, right? So do you visit the other regions as well? How often do you try to get to the markets that you service? And nothing like listening to what's happening on the ground, isn't it? Like for yourself.
Yeah, those water cooler conversations are so important. I think, I do try to get that out there as often as I can, but I think also in the age of remote working now, that's definitely been helpful. I don't think I could do this job otherwise. Probably 5 years ago would have been a lot more difficult. And then I also think like in the age of AI, like that has really helped with just being able to quickly adapt things. But yeah, nothing beats, those face-to-face conversations. And I think, getting out on the ground, meeting the customers there, meeting the team, or even connecting with the team regularly on a virtual basis is really going to set you up for success.
Yeah, that's for sure. Are there any tools or platforms that you rely on to help you, manage across these regions? Anything that you can recommend?
Yeah, for sure. One thing that I just find incredible about this role, and again, I think this time last year, this role would have been a lot harder without the use of AI, right? Like, so we use AI in a really interesting way here because of the need to, and just as an example, the need to really highly localize our assets for the Japanese market. I don't speak Japanese, but it is one of our highest growth markets in the region. And so we look to AI and we train our internal enterprise model. So the way that we set this up is firstly, we worked with our agency to create a messaging Bible, and that was done in conjunction with, inputs from our customers, our internal team, kind of the agency's understanding of, Japanese language nuance as well. And so that whole messaging Bible has things from a glossary of words, things that we need to translate from English to Japanese, and things we must keep in English because it's a product name or it's a brand name, and everything through to cultural sensitivities, types of images you can use, colors you can use, and which context as well. And then we also, had all of our taglines translated, so helping our internal English-speaking audience understand why it's not a one-for-one translation. So I'll just give you an example. Like in English, our tagline is "Know what matters, act first." When we put that in front of our Japan customer focus group, they kind of just turned their heads and they said, well, I mean, we don't really understand that. And so when we teased it out a little bit and I asked them, when you think about our brand, like what do you think about or what's really important to you? They said proactiveness in cybersecurity and being able to see everything. And so we said, okay, let's try and put that into our LLM and see, what it comes out with. And so we ended up translating in Japanese to say, identify critical threats and take preemptive action. Like that's the English back translation. So a little bit more context to that. It's a little bit more direct. It's not as conceptual, but like that's what resonates for that market. And in addition to that messaging Bible that we put together, we feed that into the LLM. We also feed it past translated assets as well. We also have, some of our English assets. We put it into the machine and we say, like, please translate this, and it, comes out with its own translation. We have the internal team review it and then put that reviewed version back into the LLM and say, find all the differences from your translation versus the one that we did with our internal team and save that to your memory. So those are kind of the things we use to train it. And then moving forward, we give it really specific prompts to say, hey, like, please translate this data sheet, remembering, the glossary that we used and all the learnings from the past data sheets that you've translated. And, over time, that machine kind of learns the language of the business and is able to kind of, spit out these assets a lot more quickly. So AI is definitely one of the ways that I manage this really diverse market.
Yeah, that's great to see how you're using AI very productively and across various regions, right? And I think that's definitely becoming the game changer already. And I think what we are doing and what we're seeing also with AI is not just kind of using AI to produce content or improve your productivity, but it's also being found, like how your businesses are found, because customers these days are going to ChatGPT and Gemini and whatnot to look for solutions and services. So generative engine optimization is something we've been spending a lot of time kind of understanding and learning so that we can be found on that as an agency, but also then help our clients to be found on it. And I know our team's spending a lot of time in how do we create conversational content that engines can read and understand and bring you up, in addition to keeping your SEO going, because SEO is still very relevant. Keywords are very relevant and important, especially for advertising campaigns and the like, right? And I liked how you localized your message, for the Japan market, understanding what the target audience wants to resonate with, rather than just saying, okay, here's a global message, let's go with it, right? So that's really fantastic. The how you're spending a lot of effort into localizing your approach and adapting it. If you look ahead 2 to 3 years, you touched upon AI. What other trends do you think are going to shape growth marketing in APAC?
Yeah, it's really interesting you mentioned GEO, because I think that's definitely going to be something that will continue to just be on the rise quite rapidly. I look forward to seeing a lot more visual content come out of it as a result from brands. I think, in an age where we can just get information so easily by prompting an LLM to find it for us, it's really those visual creative content that will set us all apart and set brands apart. Because that information from a text perspective can be easily found. And so how do you actually engage an audience and pull them in and get them to kind of align with your brand and seek for your solutions? I also think, with APAC, it's a very rapidly growing region from an economic perspective. So I think, we'll just keep seeing companies investing more into this region, and they should be looking for local APAC marketers to help drive that growth. There is a real big opportunity here for companies to grow in this region. And I think that they can only do it when they have the people on the ground here with the knowledge, the culture, the tool sets, skill sets to be able to understand all of the cultural nuances and be able to service this market.
Yeah, thank you. You summed that up very well. Let's wrap up with a quick fire round of short answers to questions. So if you were to describe each of your markets, Australia, Japan, Korea, Singapore, and India, in just one word, what would they be?
One word for each or one word in total?
Either way.
Okay, sure. I think for Japan, the word I would use is detailed. ANZ, Australia, New Zealand, honest. Singapore or the ASEAN region as a whole, dynamic. India, big. Korea, paced.
Yeah, I'm from India, as you know, from Chennai and the southeast coast of India. It's definitely a region in and of itself, let's say, with so many local languages. But the one thing I think, because English is predominantly the language of business, you can, to a certain degree, depending on the industry you're in, manage the market. Is there a book or a podcast or a resource that's had a big influence on your approach to growth marketing?
Yeah, I think the biggest influence that I've had throughout my career as a marketer has predominantly been my mentors, both on an unofficial and official capacity, all the way from when I was an intern through to, as of right now. But, they're not just brilliant marketers, but it's also people who are on the ground speaking to our customers and who understand the dynamics of the region. So field CISOs, customer success managers, those are the people who are the ones keeping up to date with everything happening in the region from, a news perspective or just the dynamics, geopolitics, the intersection of that with cybersecurity. So those are the people I really enjoy kind of learning from, getting ideas from, and just seeing their perspective as to what will resonate in this market. Oh, yeah. And I think another thing is just keeping up to news with what's happening in that region, particularly when you work in a sector like mine where everything kind of like intersects with cybersecurity. It's great and very important to keep up to date with everything that's happening.
Yeah, and I was just going to say it's great to have good mentors that you can, rely on and use as a sounding board, because there's just so much to keep up with. I mean, you're managing so many markets. It's just, lack of a better word, a nightmare. It can become a nightmare. So it's great to have good mentors, right?
Yes. And yeah, it's definitely challenging some days, but we love a challenge. And, why reinvent the wheel in a lot of cases? These are some brilliant marketers who have tried and tested the region. They know which vendors to work with. They know what messages will resonate. So, sometimes it's not a one-for-one, but it's certainly a starting point in a lot of cases.
Yeah. If you could give one piece of advice to a marketer who's starting out to manage this region, what would it be?
I would say dream big, but start small.
Great advice.
Yeah, I think, it's really good to have the drive and the ambition. I think, on days when things get really challenging, those big dreams kind of keep you going. And, those dreams are the things that keep you connected to this market and wanting to see its success and economic growth, right? From a cybersecurity perspective as well, it's the desire to kind of make the world a safer place for everybody, particularly on the digital front. But yeah, I think it is a big region and it's good to have these big ideas, but you will be surprised when you start how much there is to do. So Go easy on yourself.
Yeah, fantastic advice. Thank you, Vivien. Vivien, thank you for such an engaging discussion. I'm sure our listeners will walk away with plenty of ideas that they can put into practice right away. It's been such a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you so much, Robert. Thanks for having me.
That was Vivien Dao sharing some fantastic insights on what it really takes to manage growth marketing across APAC. One region, but truly many markets. If you enjoyed today's conversations, I'd love for you to follow or subscribe to Asia AIM so you don't miss future episodes. And if you found this discussion valuable, please share it with a colleague or a friend or a mentee who's working across APAC. I'm sure they'll get as much out of it as you did. Thanks so much for listening or watching. I'm Robert Heldt. I'll be back soon with more conversations on how to win in Asia's dynamic and diverse markets.
Thanks for tuning in to the Asia AIM podcast. If today's conversation sparked new ideas or insight, be sure to subscribe, rate, and share the show. For more resources, tips on doing business in Asia, or to book a meeting with our team, visit asiaimpodcast.com. Stay curious, stay connected, and we'll see you in the next episode of Asia AIM.